Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the age of Katrina, not Obama. I'm still processing everything we've talked about.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in. Really pushes you to look at the world differently.
It's definitely a challenging piece. Raises some really uncomfortable
Yeah.
questions about race, power, and the limits of progress.
One thing that keeps coming back to me is Ford's argument that Obama's focus on colorblindness
Right.
actually made it harder to address the systemic racism that was
Mm-hmm.
so clearly on display during and after Katrina.
Yeah.
How can that be?
Yeah.
Isn't the goal to move beyond race
Yeah.
and create a society where everyone is treated equally?
That's the idea, right. But
Mhm.
Ford's point is that you can't just, wish away the legacy of racism
Right.
and pretend that it no longer shapes people's lives.
Yeah.
He argues that Obama's colorblind rhetoric, while well-intentioned, ultimately served to silence critiques and downplay the very real ways in which race continues to impact everything, from housing to healthcare to education.
So he's saying that we need to acknowledge the reality
Yeah.
of race and racism if we want to create meaningful change. We can't just sweep it under the rug.
Exactly. And it's not just about acknowledging the past
Yeah.
either. It's about recognizing how those historical patterns of injustice continue to manifest in the present, even in subtle and insidious ways.
It's interesting because Ford published this article back in 2008 during Obama's first campaign.
Right.
He was already kind of sounding the alarm, warning people not to get too caught up in the symbolism of Obama's election and to stay focused on the real work of social and economic justice. It's almost like he was predicting the backlash that would come later.
It's remarkable how prescient his analysis feels, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
He was essentially saying, look, electing a black president is a historic achievement, but it doesn't magically erase centuries of systemic racism.
Mhm.
And I think in many ways, events of the past few years have proven him right.
It's like we took a step forward, but then we took 2 steps back.
Well, it's more complicated than that, of course. But I think Ford would argue that the backlash we've seen is, in part, a reaction to the very progress that Obama's election represented. It exposed the fragility of the status quo and the deep resistance to any real change in the balance of power.
So if we accept Ford's argument, where does that leave us? What can
Yeah.
we actually do to create a more just and equitable society, especially in the face of such entrenched resistance?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that we're not starting from scratch.
Right.
There are countless individuals and organizations that have been working tirelessly for social justice for generations.
Yeah.
The movement for Black lives, the fight for economic equality, the struggle for environmental justice. These are all interconnected struggles that are pushing us towards a more just and equitable future.
So it's about building on that legacy
Yeah.
of activism and resistance?
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that this work requires sustained effort and commitment.
Yeah.
It's not about quick fixes or symbolic victories. It's about challenging power structures, shifting cultural narratives, and creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
I'm starting to see how Ford's argument about Katrina connects to so many other issues we're facing today.
It's about climate change. It's about economic inequality. It's about the erosion of democracy. It's all connected.
You're absolutely right, and that's what makes this piece so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not just about one hurricane or one president.
Right.
It's about understanding the deeper forces that shape our world
Yeah.
and challenging the systems that perpetuate injustice.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
And I feel like we've only scratched the surface. What are your final takeaways,
Yeah.
for our listeners? What do you hope they take away from this conversation?
I hope they come away with a deeper understanding of the complexities of race and inequality in America. I hope they feel inspired to learn more, to get involved, and to keep pushing for a better future. And I hope they remember that change is possible, but it requires all of us to do our part.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and keep diving deep into the issues that matter most. We'll see you next time.